been a year that we've had this Zoe, and I thought I'd make a special video to commemorate that. For us, this was a bit of a journey into the unknown. We were excited by the prospect of owning an electric car and being one of the first sort of few folk to really have a go. And we weren't expecting much. We really weren't. We were expecting it to be a second car. We were expecting it to be very poor performance on main roads and things like that. We couldn't test this ZE40 R110 when we looked to buy it. We had to test the older 22 kilowatt 80 PS or 80 horsepower version. And so when we took delivery of this, to say that we were shocked was an understatement. It was, and it is, so much more capable than the 22 kilowatt version. It's a different car in the same skin. It really is. And for us, it's set us on a different path. So now we are going to go 100% EV. There's no question about it. We will be buying another EV. It's not an if, it's a when. That is testament of itself. This is a fantastic car, absolutely fantastic. And it's not just the fact that the Zoe's fantastic, actually EVs as a whole have a better driving experience, because this car, just like when you went from a petrol to a diesel, you felt that torque difference. Well, going from a diesel to an EV, you get that torque difference again, but you also get this amazing throttle response, a throttle response like you wouldn't believe. It's instantaneous, and that is hugely impressive and makes for an effortless driving experience. So something that I think a lot of people, when they step inside an EV, really are surprised by, pleasantly so. So for me, this is one of the biggest things about these cars. Now, of course, what everyone starts to talk about is range, and that's, you know, that is fair enough, because actually, like I said, these cars previously had a very poor range, but now actually with this R110 with a 40 kilowatt battery, this has got a perfectly acceptable range in the middle of winter, 147 miles, and we bought this as a second car. We don't need to do 147 miles, nowhere near it. And that's the thing. Most people don't need a huge amount of range, and for those that do, there are now EVs that will cope with that. And what we found with this car is that it's completely replaced our diesel, bar the longest journeys, which we do very rarely. And so for the money, it's really not worth keeping that car. We really need two cars that we want to use, not just the one car that we want to use over the other one, and that's the big difference. The silence is another thing altogether. Something that you don't really appreciate until you get into an electric car and drive it for a distance is actually how draining the sound of a petrol or diesel engined car is, especially one with a 4-cylinder engine, which can tend to be quite lumpy. But with contrast, an electric motor makes hardly any sound at all, so it's really, really comfortable to drive a long distance. And the torque that electric motor gives you is also really great. And it doesn't corner too badly either. Now if you really do give it the beans around corners, you will find that this car understeers, but it doesn't understeer like a traditional petrol car or a diesel car where all that weight's up the front. Because the weight's down low in underneath you, essentially in the battery unit, it feels like the car kind of wants to carry on going in a straight line, but from underneath you. It's quite a weird sensation when you first experience it, but it is understeer all the same. It just feels slightly different, and actually they seem to have managed it quite well. It doesn't really come into effect until you really do start to drive it a little bit too hard. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing through the year. We've had a few issues, and there's some things about the car we don't like. No car is perfect. Door seals, you've seen my videos on the door seal issue that we had. The interior is looking a bit dated, and clearly that's something that has been addressed in the new ZE50 version of the car. Some of the other things that they haven't gotten right on this car, which they've improved on the next one, is the reversing sound, or lack of it. So when you're pulling out of a space in a car park, it doesn't make any noise when it goes backwards, which is a bit of a pain if you are trying to alert people to the fact that you're moving. When you turn an electric car on, nothing happens. It doesn't make any noise whatsoever. And so the problem with that is that you, as a pedestrian, don't make the same choices as you would do if you heard an engine running. Instead, what you do is you just carry on walking as close to the cars as possible, because you don't want to walk in the middle of a car park or whatever. But as an EV owner, you have to be conscious that pedestrians can't hear you. So it would be nice to have an option where, maybe not all of the time, but you know, when you were in a car park or something, you could just turn a noise on so that people knew your EV was idling and about to move off. It's fair enough when it makes a sound at low speeds like it is now, but actually I'd like it to make a sound when you switch it on, and I'd like it to make a sound when it goes in reverse, just so that people are kind of used to, you know, so they don't have to get used to something else. It is a good looking car as well. Despite being called Zoe, which someone commented on, how can it be more manly with a Zoe? Well, you know, if you're insecure about stuff like that, then you know, go and buy a Ford Mustang or something, the EV version of course. Another thing that I don't like is the gasometer, the GOM, as it's been called. It really doesn't give you the accuracy that I think a lot of people will need for security, but at the end of the day, once you get used to it, you then understand what you can do. And I think that's one of the main things that people fear about when they get an EV, because it's only got 150 miles range, or it's only got 280 miles of range, then they kind of see that as a oh my god, you know, what if I run out? And to be honest, if you look at actually how much you drive, and yeah, sure, I'm sure some people do drive hundreds of miles a day, but for the most people, it's not like that at all. So what about the exterior of the car then? Let's pull in and take a look. Overall, this car is really nicely styled, and I can't really fault its design. And in fact, you can see that in the new one, because it doesn't look a lot different. The only things I really don't like, which they have improved on the new car, is these lights. Not LEDs, so it just frustrates me a little bit. The lighting is actually quite poor. I've upgraded the bulbs in this just to make them a little bit brighter, but that is a real weak point on this car. The headlights could be a bit brighter, and for a modern car they should be. Now, another thing about this car which I have had problems with is these door seals. We've had water leaking in, which we had to have some attention paid by the dealer. But so far, touch wood, it hasn't happened again. But it really feels like a fault that shouldn't have needed to be there. And it's really only these things that you find after you've owned the car for a little while and had it in all conditions. So, you know, they're my two main things about the exterior of the car. So let's now go and have a look inside. Now inside the car, it's a slightly less modern interior than you'd expect, which is because this car is actually an old car now. 2012 was the first version of the Zoe, and the interior hasn't changed at all in that time, and that's why the new one has such a more modern interior. Now, some of the things that this car has got also mean that the interior struggles to accommodate those features, much like these weirdly placed heated seat buttons. I've never seen heated seat buttons placed in a more awkward position ever, and it's really it really just shows how this interior isn't working anymore and really did need a refresh. Now, I like pretty much all of the controls on the dash and on the steering wheel. I don't like the placement of the eco button and the two buttons that either limit your speed or have activate the cruise control. Down by the gear stick doesn't seem to be the best place. The eco button also seems a little bit hard to press sometimes and actually get it to activate. So you press it and you think it's come on or off, and it hasn't. So that's a little bit of a niggle. However, my main frustration is with the infotainment system. This system is really showing its age, and actually it's not terribly reliable. We've had situations where we've tried to use it after, you know, popping to a shop or something. We've been streaming from our iPhones using the Bluetooth connectivity, and then it just fails to work, or it fails to actually then load your song selections from the phone. So that's really annoying, because actually the Bose stereo that we went for in this car is brilliant. As a sound system, it's excellent. The only compromise you really make when you get the Bose sound system is that you lose a bit of your boot space for the subwoofer that sits in the boot. I got around that by buying a double trunk storage option, which I made a video about, which then protects the subwoofer and gives you a few little cubby compartments for wires and other things, and then you can, you know, have a flat load area on top. I was worried about the subwoofer getting scratched up and damaged by all the things that will go in and out of the boot, so it really keeps it nice and out of the way. So that's the front. What about the back? Well, in the back, we obviously have two young children, and so it's very good for them. A couple of adults would easily fit in there. Might be a touch of leg squeeze on the front seats, but nothing too major. We've got two young kids, and what's really nice about having no transmission tunnel is that they can get in the car easily from one side. And in the boot, actually plenty of space. We went from a Golf down to this, and whilst it is a little bit smaller, it's not drastically smaller. We've even taken this camping, as you've probably seen, and we got on pretty well. So that's the interior. It's okay, but the new version is a much bigger leap forward, and you know, I'm certainly very impressed with the direction that they've gone. The other thing that you can activate from your key fob on this version of the Zoe is the air conditioning. You can either do that in the winter when it's really cold and you can preheat the car and defrost the car, which is a fantastic feature, and you can also do it in summer to cool the car down before you get in, which is again a great feature, and we use this feature a lot. Now, I'm really disappointed that this has been sort of exiled to the app, and it's a real shame, because just being able to press it from the button on the remote was really the best thing, because you didn't have to think about it. You could just press one button and you knew it was working. It's one of those things which I think they've made a mistake on the new car. I think they're trying to drive the app usage up, but unfortunately I think it's going to be sadly missed by a lot of people who own the ZE40. So the app itself is something that we've barely used, and perhaps that's why Renault are trying to put more features into the app, so that more people do use it. But we've, you know, once we sort of checked the charge a couple of times, we understood what it could do, then, you know, we didn't really use it again. We also had an issue when we first bought the car where the app actually stopped working, stopped communicating with the car, and that was something in the car that needed to be reset. So again, that was a bit of an issue for us. Right, let's get back on the road. One year with the Zoe, and actually, all things said and done, it's been a brilliant car. We may even buy the ZE50 because the valuation on this car hasn't really changed since we bought it, which is incredible, and a testament to the demand in which these cars currently are. So we might end up buying the new one, we'll see. But one thing's clear, having this car has convinced us to go fully electric. So watch this space in the new year for more news about what places our other car. One of the other sad things is with the new Zoe is they've abolished the battery lease, and this seems to have come as a late decision because, as I said in another video, when we went to the dealer and saw the new Zoe, they had all of the material there for the battery lease on the ZE50. Now, the reason this makes me slightly sad is because a lot of people will balk at the price of the new Zoe without the battery lease. And I found that actually the battery lease was a way of kind of dipping my toe into the water of electric cars without spending a huge amount of money on an EV. With the battery lease, you could essentially feel like you were paying for fuel and not have the upfront cost of the entire car plus battery. And there are a few extra benefits as well, like the fact that you got the breakdown cover included. So for me, if this car hadn't have originally come with a battery lease, I don't think I'd have ended up owning a Zoe, which is a real sad state of affairs, because I'm so glad we did buy it. About charging then. Well, what's more convenient than being able to plug your car in at home and then come out the next day and have a full battery? I don't know about you, but that for me is much more convenient. Now, okay, this car can't charge very quickly in public charging infrastructure, and that's why it's our second car. But actually, even when we have been out and charged, we've actually driven some distance, and actually we needed to stop for a few minutes anyway. So I really don't have a problem with the charging rate on this car, but for our primary car, then yeah, we would need something that charged a little bit quicker, and hopefully that's what we'll get. Now, I'd just like to thank everyone who's subscribed to the channel. Thanks ever so much. Also, thanks hugely to the people who have used the Octopus Go referral code, which I have, and that's allowed me to buy spend the money I would have been spending on energy buying camera equipment, which is much more fun and interesting. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it. And hopefully I can make a few more interesting videos next year about the new car that we're going to get, and all of the stuff that's going to go on with that as well. So stay tuned for some videos about that next year. So don't forget, like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz, and we'll see you in the next one.